All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you for coming to this webinar to introduce the LED Innovation Hub that is powered by the Environmental Policy Innovation Center, or EPIC. My name is Palencia Mobley, and I serve as the Senior Advisor for Water Infrastructure at EPIC. Today, you'll also hear from Denise Schmidt, our Director of Water, as well as Valerie Guyan, who will be administering our slides as well as the poll for you today. And with that, Valerie, could you change the slide? So today, we're going to have a brief presentation on the LED Innovation Hub. It's a website that provides resources for mayors, elected officials, community representatives, as well as utilities. We have three very exciting guests here with us today. Sean Karashki from Community Infrastructure Partners, David Fielder, someone that I worked with for many years when I was at the Detroit Water and Sewage Department. And we also have Representative Dontavius Geralds from the Ohio House of Representatives. We're so glad that they could join us today and share their experiences with regards to lead service line replacement. In addition to the panel, we'll have a Q&A, and then we'll also have some next steps when we close regarding the hub. We like to kick this off by asking you a poll question. And Valerie's going to launch that poll. Do you think your local or state lead service line replacement program is on track? Yes or no? Or you know what? We haven't even started. Valerie, how's that poll coming along? Are we ready to close it? All right, so 50-50, but no one said they hadn't started, so I guess that's a good thing. Um, but we might should have defined what start meant, right? Just kidding. So now I'm going to turn it over to Denise Schmidt, who's going to give a little bit more background on the LED Innovation Hub and why we decided to do this project.
Thanks, Palencia, and thanks everyone. We're so delighted to see you here today to join us. I think the poll, the 50-50, kind of illustrates the why behind this hub, right? So a shout out to our partners and collaborators and some of our advisors who are listed on our website. Had we gotten to the next slide yet? I'm sorry, I can't see the slides on my screen.
Yes, we're on the why do we need a hub? Yep.
Okay, thank you. Just checking. So in our work, and a shout out to all the folks who are deeply in this work, right? The yes, we're on track, or the folks that know we're not on track, but we're working real hard on this. All the folks who have been working so hard on this topic have helped inform the why is there a need for a hub. We know there are many lead service line replacement resources out there. There are lots of folks who are really leaning into this and doing the mighty work. And there are many utilities, elected officials, communities, and state agencies engaged in this, but they also are eager to learn about what others have done to tackle the issue. And they're the folks who have said it would be helpful to have access to ready-to-use resources and a one-stop shop. So, this is just an illustration of some of the things that they were saying and helped us say, yes, we should go ahead and do this and embark on this with our collaborators and advisors. The next slide, please. We also heard that it would be helpful to have resources organized by user groups. So some things we were hearing were, mayors and local officials may have a different set of questions than utility staff. State decision makers have still different needs. And so this hub is organizing resources according to those user groups, which Valerie will dive into in just a little bit here. So what the LED Innovation Hub is aimed to do is to provide users with the information, tools, and resources they need to advance lead service line replacement. If you feel like your lead service line replacement journey is not on track, what are there resources here that can help you get unstuck in those places and on those topic areas? That's the whole aim of this hub. It's meant to elevate best practices, highlight innovative approaches, and provide you with some checklists and ready-to-use tools. So with just that high-level overview, I'll let Valerie dive in deep here as to what you'll find on the Hub.
All right, thanks, Denise. And so, like just what Denise was talking about, we recognize that there's several actors that work together to help advance LSLR programs. So we've designed the Hub to provide roadmaps to guide each of these different user groups in their LSLR journey, no matter where they're starting. So right now, the Hub has roadmaps for state decision makers, mayors, and other local electeds, water utilities. We're currently developing a fourth roadmap that's geared towards community organizers, and we're expecting to launch that later in the fall. All right, I'm going to go ahead and launch our second poll question here. What is the status of your LSLR program? And again, this is based on how much of your inventory has been replaced. I'll give you guys a minute here. Oh, congrats on whoever's program is completed. But also love to see attendees whose programs have not started yet. We're really excited to have you guys on board from Jump with this LED Innovation Hub. All right, we'll let go a few more seconds.
And I'll just note, Valerie, the folks who have it completed already, there are spots in the Hub where you can contribute your ideas and experience. So we'd love to hear from those who have replaced all their lines. How'd you get there? What were some barriers you faced and how did you tackle them?
All right, so it's looking like our most popular result is that you don't know, and that's completely okay. We're hoping that the way that we've structured our LED Innovation Hub, especially with our ready-to-use resources, will help you to kind of hit the ground running when you do find out exactly where your inventory stands. And for everyone else, where it seems there's a lot of attendees who are just starting their LSLR programs, this can help kind of accelerate your programs through our tools and resources. All right. So each of these roadmaps lays out a series of LSLR principles and key actions that stakeholders can take. We're especially proud, like I just mentioned, of our toolboxes and ready-to-use resources. Additionally, the Hub has several pages where more novice users, especially people who are just beginning their LSLR programs, can gain a better understanding of how to design and implement their programs. To date, the the LED Innovation Hub has over 200 resources, which includes 128 case studies, 55 tools, and 48 reports and analyses. We're constantly adding to our resource database, and as Denise said, we're going to cover later how you can add your own resources and comments to our Hub. All right, so I'm going to go through a brief walkthrough of the website. Display. All right. On the Hub's homepage, you can find the site navigation menu at the top here. And you can navigate to our LED Pipes 101 page to learn more about some LSLR basics. In these drop-down menus, you can find more general LSLR information. And we've designed this in an FAQ format. So if you have specific questions, we can guide you to the answers. At the bottom here are some eye-catching facts about lead and safety. If we navigate to a given roadmap, you'll find a set of LSLR principles and key actions that are tailored for each specific user journey. So for this one's for the state decision makers. Each one of these principles contains a series of key actions that can that you can navigate to with the side menu here, selections in gray. And each one of these key actions has a toolbox that highlights relevant resources. You can also search for resources directly on the resource page. And here, resources are categorized into news and stories, tools and guides, data and reports, and laws and regulations. I'm going to navigate to the data and reports collection here. So you can further refine your search by applying a series of filters you can access on the side toolbar. And this works just by selecting these different filter boxes. All right, and lastly, we want to show you guys our contact page, and this is where you can submit your story or your suggestions for our Lead Innovation Hub. We're always trying to grow our resource database, and we're always looking for ways to improve, so any feedback is welcome. All right, and with that, I'm going to launch our third audience poll here. Thanks for participating, everybody. What are some areas that you need support with in your LSLR programs? I'll give you guys another minute.
Valerie, while folks are taking the poll, we had a question about how many attendees are taking the polls today.
The last one, I think we had a bit over 50% participation. The total amount of attendees were around 40.
Thanks, Valerie.
I'll give it another few seconds here. All right, so it's looking like all of the above, which is to be expected, is what we hear a lot, especially Palencia and Denise and the Funding Navigator side of EPIC's team. We hear that there's a diverse range of issues and topics that people need assistance with their LSLR programs. The next step beyond that is funding, which I think is very interesting. And if you're curious about that, you can learn more in the Lead Innovation Hub. We have some specific principles related to financing. All right. Thanks for participating, everybody. I'll go ahead and hand it back to Palencia.
Thank you, Valerie. So, EPIC's entire thought process as it comes to anything with the environment is to accelerate progress. And what are things that we can do to break down barriers to ensure that we are creating a safe world for the rest of humanity? And so, with lead service lines, nothing is different. We are trying to help encourage and provide resources and tools to accelerate the replacement of lead service lines across the country. And so, with that, I would like to introduce each of our panelists. And I think, Valerie, you have a slide with everybody's photo and title.
Yep, that's up now. At least I hope so. Everybody can see it.
Oh, okay. Maybe I just can't see it. Oh, might have done something there. Okay. So today we have Sean Karashki with us. He is with Community Infrastructure Partners, and Sean has really piloted an innovative way to address lead service line replacement and to encourage accelerated replacement, a different procurement model than what many cities are traditionally accustomed to doing. We also have David Fielder here. David is the lead service line program manager for the Detroit Water and Sewage Department, and David manages all of the internal lead service line replacement teams that DWSD has. There's some work that's contractual, some work that is done in-house, and he also manages the entire lead testing program for Detroit Water and Sewage Department. And then we also have Rep. Dontavius Geralds here, who is one of the sponsors of a bill in Ohio that is currently, I believe, in committee. It hasn't passed yet, correct? You all are hoping to get it passed, correct?
That is
And
correct.
very good. So he is going to talk a little bit about that bill and why the state of Ohio felt it was necessary at a state level to develop legislation. I am here in Michigan. I started doing lead service line replacement because Michigan changed its law long before everyone else. And quite honestly, the EPA law is really based on Michigan. Everybody knows about Flint. I don't have to go and talk about what happened in Flint, Michigan. But we started in 2018 with some miscellaneous funds from the Michigan Department of Environment, Energy, Environment, and the Great Lakes. And there was some extra dollars left over, and we were awarded about $1 million, and we replaced about 165 lines at that time. That allowed us to better refine our processes before we got into full-scale lead service line replacement, both on a capital improvement project side. While we were replacing water mains, we knew that was the most efficient cost to do it at that time when we were doing that work. But then also on the as needed side, how do we handle these as needed lines that our teams come into play with when they're just out trying to fix a stop box or a curb stop? And so with that, I'm going to open up the floor for the panelists. And Sean, I'll start with you. Can you share your LSLR story and what sparked your efforts to accelerate lead service line replacement?
Sure. Thanks, Plenty, and thanks, everybody. Apologies for my dreary hotel blurred background here. Yeah, it's funny. Epic is actually the origin story for us. So we have a long history with Epic going back to our really roots in stormwater management and green infrastructure, and really deployed this pay for success model in that space. And Tim Mail, the executive director at Epic, probably 5 years ago, had said, you guys really should be looking at what's coming down the pike with lead service line replacements, because the federal government's really interested in the types of outcomes that you guys have been able to deliver as it relates to taking large investments of federal funds and using that as economic development for the communities that you're working in, from small business participation, workforce development, target class business participation, all those things. So we were probably 2 or 3 years ahead of anybody's readiness to have those conversations. So spent a lot of time barnstorming the country to no avail, and then ended up at then Vice President Harris's led summit in January of 23. They had a mayor's panel, and Katie Rosenberg, who was the mayor of Wausau, Wisconsin at the time, was on a panel with a bunch of very stiff men in three-piece suits, and she was about 5 foot nothing, tattooed, sneaker wearing, and said, "We have 40,000 lines and 8,000 people, and I have no idea how we're going to do this, but we're going to leverage as much funding through this bill as we can and figure it out." So I talked to her for about 2 minutes, literally, after that was over. She said, "Come to Wausau and explain how this would work." And we've never looked back.
David, what challenges have you faced, and what lessons should others take away? And this is just general context, right? This is just more of like an icebreaker type of question.
So if I had needed to answer that question 5 years ago, it would have been trying to figure out the customer service piece of it, trying to galvanize neighborhoods around the projects. But at Palencia, you kind of already gave all of my speech notes on this, so I'm glad you actually set it up. But one of the unique things about Detroit was our proximity to Flint. And because of our proximity, there were more people aware of what happened and more people willing to get involved very quickly. Now, initially, it took a second for us to get going, but once we got going, the ball kept rolling down the hill. That was that biggest hurdle 5 years ago. 2 years ago, it was the permitting process and getting involved with all of the different city agencies that now wanted to be a part of what was going on, and now making sure that that flow got set. So then we got that hurdle jumped, and now I think just almost it was the second highest answered question on the discussion was the funding. That's everybody's concern now. The next step is trying to continue to get the funding necessary to keep all of these programs going and keep this good work flowing.
Yeah, I made the joke in an internal meeting that we were trying to be so proactive in terms of getting people's permission to change service lines at DWSD that we were getting forms signed ahead of the project starting.
Yeah.
And there would be times people didn't have a lead service line, but we just wanted to know that we had clearance if they did.
Yep.
And so we would have folks calling us and, well, you didn't change mine. You didn't change mine. And we'd have to say, well, you didn't have lead.
Right.
They were like, well, no, I want it changed. And we're like, well, we don't need to change it because it's not.
Right.
So, you know, we learned some lessons from that, right? How do you better we were trying to be forthcoming, but
Yeah.
hey, it actually turned to a little bit of a hiccup for us. So we changed
Yeah.
that process.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, David. And so, Rep. Gerald, if you had a magic wand, just, you know, you're a fairy, right? And got a magic wand, bibbity boppity boo. What would be one thing that you would change to accelerate LSLR?
I think unlimited funding, to be quite frank with you. It- Oftentimes, when I talk to municipalities about the difficulties and barriers to identifying where lead service lines are, remediating them, it ultimately comes and boils down to resources. And, every community is at a different point in regards to where they are in terms of addressing lead service line replacement. In some communities, they haven't even done a municipal wide survey or assessment to see how many lead service lines still are in existence. And in some communities across Ohio, they've done a whole number of things working with various partners. They have advocacy organizations that are really on the ground, ensuring that there's a focal point on this issue. And so having more resources, I think, is incredibly important. The truth is in Ohio, we have 745,000 lead service lines still active in the state. It makes us third in the country. Cleveland, where I'm from, is number 2 in the nation in terms of active lead service lines, and the number of babies and children who essentially get lead poison. I was one of them. And so it's one of those things where if we had the money, if I was I won't say a fairy, but if I had a magic wand, I would be giving every single municipality across all 88 counties all the money they need to remove lead service lines once and for all. And that's what we're doing in House Bill 307.
Thank you, Rep. Gerald. And so, Sean, I think you have one of the most interesting models I've seen as it comes to procuring lead service line replacement. And so can you tell us tell us what Pay for Success is,
Sure.
but also explain why it's well suited for lead service line replacement and how it can really help communities reduce costs.
Sure. Yeah. So Pay for Success is now, in our former iteration, it was really called the Community-Based Public-Private Partnership, which is what the EPA, named it when it was developed in the early 2010s. We've gotten away from the name simply because the P3 nomenclature is problematic in an already problematic procurement environment. It's not a P3, it's just the name of the delivery model. But the idea basically, Palencia, is that it is a performance-based contracting structure by which we, as the private sector, our compensation is tied to the achievement of technical, financial, and social KPIs. So if we don't perform to the contracted KPIs or key performance indicators, metrics, whatever term you want to use in the contract, we don't achieve our full compensation. So it is the essence of aligned interest and shared outcomes. So for example, in the lead service line space, our KPIs are we have a fixed not to exceed price, we have a fixed schedule, we have a percentage of dollars that have to go to local residents, we have a percentage of dollars that have to go to SBEs, MBEs, WMBEs, and we have a KPI tied to workforce development and creating a mentor protege program and putting people who graduate through that through our program. So any one of those things we don't hit, we don't achieve our compensation. So the reason lead service lines are well suited to that structure is, no offense to any of our potential engineers on the call, is this is commodity work when you strip it all away. This is challenging because it is public health that can only be achieved through effective community outreach and engagement and logistical planning. It's not complicated engineering. It is not complicated construction. It's logistics planning around the public health lens. So because you know what needs to be done, by being able to bundle things together at a unit cost, you should not be in any position where you're paying time and materials and have extensive and expensive, inefficient costs associated with this work. When you look at some of the pricing that's out there in the larger cities, we won't mention any by name here, but you have $35,000, $40,000, $45,000 a line, which honestly is criminal and completely unnecessary. So in a pay for success structure, you know what the not to exceed is. So the example I'll give quickly is in our flagship program I mentioned earlier in Wausau. In the first year, we were contracted to replace 553 lines for $5.7 million. That was before construction bidding went out. So through the work we do to encourage bidding and bring competition to that process, we were able to get better than expected pricing. Because of that, we replaced 605 lines for $5.1 million. And again, this is a community that had never replaced more than 55 lines. So we don't keep the surplus. We're not trying to put as many people on this and bill as many hours and have it last as long as possible as annuity income. We're trying to get as much work done as possible with the amount of money we received. So they got 11% more lines done for 11% less costs, because all the money stays in the program because we have the same interest as our partners in getting as much work done for the value.
Thank you, Sean. And so, in your view, what makes pay for success a more fiscally responsible approach for municipalities versus traditional contracting models?
Yeah, it's my favorite question because it allows me to get on my soapbox for a minute. And if I say this, one more time, I would either be retired if I got a dollar every time I said it, or in an institution at this point. But the reality goes back to what I said earlier. Time and materials is the single biggest problem, in my opinion, outside of the limited funding with lead service line replacements. There's no need for it. And when you have it, if you think about what that incentivizes, it incentivizes duration and it incentivizes headcount. The longer it goes with the more people on it, the more those companies make. You do not need that in any way whatsoever for this type of delivery. So I think when you put that aside and you look at understanding the value of what the unit cost is and being able to bring in the other types of measures that I talked about earlier, when you layer on what Rep. Gerald's talked about earlier, is the communities where there remains a preponderance of lead service lines on the private side are in those disadvantaged communities primarily. So why wouldn't you take this type of work that has low barrier of entry, touches so many things beyond the trades? It touches social media, communications, it touches program management, it touches so many different things. Why wouldn't you build your program around figuring out how to ensure this infusion of federal dollars stays in the communities that have been plagued with this problem for so long?
Yeah, excellent answer. I know internally when we were doing this, we did two different bid models initially, long side versus short side. And then eventually we just wanted unit price. What's the price per line done, right? And so it's up to the contractor to figure out how he could get it done in those parameters. But initially we were trying to say, oh, okay, well, if it's a long side, it's going to, nope, give me a price per line done. And so, last but not least, can you share how many projects you've been able to implement with the pay for success model, and where you currently stand? Well, you gave us your performance metrics for Wausau. Any other execution metrics or clients that you may have that actually ask for something slightly different than what you kind of came to the table with, and they may have added something else?
Yeah, It's a great question. So we're moving into we are in the middle of year 2 in Wausau. So as I mentioned earlier, they'd never done more than 55. Last year, 605. This year will be over 1,500. Next year, if the city council approves year 3, will be over 2,000. So a great model for a small to mid-sized utility that went from 55 to over 2,000. We are operationalizing in 3 other communities as we speak, similar size, different stage of the process. Another one in Wisconsin, one in Rhode Island, and another one that I'm not allowed to say yet. The performance measures are mostly the same. I will say you will also get some people, depending on who you're working with, where they say, no, we don't care about that, but they view it as overcomplicating what they want to get done, which is just get these out fast and as cost effectively as possible. So we still try to push for those things because it's just core and inherent to our model. The last thing I will say, and it was interesting to see the polls, we're bringing this sort of pay for success concept now much further forward in the process as it relates to verifications. So it's been hard to see through the lack of publication of statewide inventories where people are in the process. So certainly Ohio, Illinois, Midwest is much more transparent or published. So for us, what we're doing now is seeing how many places still haven't started in a pay for success construct. We're going out to places and using their local community-based organizations and local residents to do verifications, but to do it in full risk transfer pay for success, which means we only get paid for homes that get verified, and then we get an extra piece of that if we get them to sign the ROE. So you're not worried about how inefficient your operation is, who's taking long lunches, who's napping under a tree. If we go to 1,000 homes and have to go to them 2 or 3 times, but can only get into 500 and verify those, you're only paying for those 500. So it's just super important that with a lot of the things that you've dealt with and David's dealt with and Rep. Gerald's has dealt with, that you remove as many bottlenecks and barriers to just getting people off the dime to getting this work done as quickly as possible, facing the November 27 deadline that will set the baseline for replacements going forward.
Thanks, Sean. And I want to highlight one important point about the pay for success model. It is traditionally not something that a community would procure, right? It tends to be an unsolicited type of proposal. And quite honestly, those of you who are on this call, you're getting a lot of information that would allow you to write an RFP to procure this type of service. But this is not a model most communities employ. And so I think it's astounding how well it can be done, allow you to achieve some goals you may have internal to your community. Most underrepresented communities really, or disadvantaged communities really do try to ensure community is engaged some kind of way in the process, that we are providing opportunities for folks to enter the labor force. And so I think Sean's model is a great way to accelerate lead service line replacement, but to also have a partner who really, if it's up, it's up. If it's down, it's down. And they're really engaged in that model with you. So thank you so much, Sean. David, I'm going to turn over to you for a moment. Let's talk a little bit about what methods you all are using to replace lead service lines with the in-house staff at the water department.
Yeah, so we primarily use the directional boring machine, but in instances where there are tree roots that stop us from getting through or any other obstructions that are underground, we will attempt the cable pulling method. Fortunately enough, I've had a unique experience because I worked on the contracting side, as you know, like working on the engineering side and then working internally. So I've gotten the chance to see both a established process and then a process that had to be built from the ground up. And one of the things that I tried to, in coming over to the internal side, make a priority was not to sacrifice productivity over development. And so allowing these different methods between the directional boring method and then the cable pulling method to be utilized as needed gave the team a chance to not only, flex their muscles, but also develop into a faster, well-oiled machine that could get in and out of people's houses quickly.
And so do you think you all have been able to keep up with the replacement rates of contractor crews? I know at one point, even pulling, we did not have the directional boring machines at the time. We were pulling lines at the same rate. If the contractor was doing 2 to 3 a day with the boring machine, we were doing 2 or 3 a day with in-house crews, just doing the cable pull method. So do you think you all are comparable?
Yeah, I would say we are. I know again, one of the things that was paramount when I got over here was making sure that we highlighted development. I think when it comes to trying to be as fast as you possibly can, you put your best, fastest person on the machine, you keep that person on the machine, and then you start to realize, oh, wait a minute, if this person stays on the machine, then we are entirely dependent on this one person to stay productive. And so trying to balance that act with, hey, we've got to rotate people on and off to make sure that we can, not have one person derail the project or the program was huge. But I would say we've attempted to try and stay as fast as the contractors have been. Yes.
Very good. That's always a thing for my water utility folks out there. We were very fortunate in terms of the types of job descriptions and positions we had. So we have like a one size fits all job description. And I say we because it's very hard. People told me it was going to take 5 years. It's been almost five. I've been gone 3 years and I still say we, but I'm a Detroiter, so I can't help it. And so we have a ubiquitous job description and it allows us to train people and rotate people. So when I needed you on a Vector to sewer clean, I had you there. But if I need you to pull a lead service line, I had you pulling a lead service line the next day. And so that was very fortunate for the design of that program. And so let's talk about customer participation rates and where you guys are now. And then what you might be able to tell us about creating the trust and engagement between customers. And I'll, preface this with Detroit went through a major bankruptcy circa 2013, 2014. And there was a lot of distrust as it related to the water department from a lot of bills that had not been collected for a long time and things that were going on during bankruptcy. So it created this contentious situation with customers in the department. And so we're 10 years past that and some change. David, how has that impacted participation rates?
Yeah. I mean, you said it. The lack of trust made the initial program launch very, very difficult because they not only didn't trust the water as an entity itself, the water department as an entity itself, but they didn't trust government. I can't remember which president said it. It might have been Ronald Reagan, but the last words you ever want to hear from somebody are, "Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Right? It throws people off. It makes people uncomfortable. And so one of the things that we learned throughout the process was education was huge, right? Our public affairs department did and has done and continues to do a phenomenal job at educating neighborhoods at community meetings. We'll go out with public affairs when they do have these meetings to make sure that we clearly communicate not only what's going on, but how long it's going to take, what neighbors can expect. But the other thing, and I don't know if this is unique to Detroit, but it's something that I've seen time and time again in Palencia. I know you have too. Regardless of what the project was, I've had the chance to work on lead service line replacement projects. I had the chance to work on the 54-inch water main break in Southwest Detroit and work on the street PM in that. When you get certain neighbors to trust you, the entire neighborhood eventually ends up trusting you, right? Because it's a communal effort. And once the grandmother, the aunt, the uncle, the grandfather that's on the corner says, "Oh no, they're solid," you find that once you get in one house, you're able to get in the next 10, right? And so continuing to make sure that we've stayed focused on the community engagement part of it has been a huge, huge part of the success that we've seen at the city of Detroit.
Thank you, David. I will make one small comment on that, and that's just I've been gone all of these years, and people still reach out to me, whether it is people in government working for city council people, whether it's people in other departments across the city, still value my expertise. And that says a lot about creating trust in a place where trust had been broken for a very, very long time with how people dealt with community. So again, David, thank you for continuing to hold up that work and knowing that our residents are our greatest asset. Rep Gerald, can you tell us a little bit more about House Bill 307 and how you are hoping to improve access to replace lead service lines when homeowners are reluctant or unresponsive?
Yeah, so first off, I really am glad to be on this call with all of you, just hearing about what's happening in Detroit or Michigan. I know that we are we're the state over there, in terms of football. But in Ohio, I think it's so important to really, I started talking about this in my um, beginning remarks. Ohio is woefully behind. And I see this as an infrastructure issue in so many different ways, not just on a public health front, but really, we are dealing with old cities. And when you have a place like Cleveland that, every day, every year, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids are, um, you know, literally held back by having lead poisoning and not knowing it, their family not being aware of it, and then ultimately that impacts their ability to learn in school, impacts their ability to concentrate. That can have cardiovascular issues when they grow older. All types of ailments happen because of that one moment where they're drinking tainted water, and we could have done so much in the front end to prevent it. And so House Bill 307 is really I think a love letter. I always say a love letter to Ohioans about what type of Ohio do we deserve? And I believe that every single Ohioan deserves clean water. I mean, that's just the simple truth. And you should know in full confidence that the water you are drinking out of your tap is healthy. And I think the current reality is many families do not know or are unaware that the water they're drinking could very well be tainted with lead particles. And so House Bill 307 is, I think, a really bold bipartisan bill that would remove lead service lines across Ohio. There's 745,000 that we currently have actively still in the state of Ohio um, within the next 15 years. And it does a number of things. It does full line replacements, so no partial replacements. It does a complete inventory of all our lead service lines. So again, as I mentioned earlier about municipalities not having the tools to assess where these lead service lines are. Our job, this bill would, require that every municipality really does this full inventory of where these lead service lines are. Working with the Ohio EPA to develop a rubric for establishing in rule how do we want to replace these lead service lines. And so I think of this bill much like the foundation or the bedrock, if you will, of how we're going to build ourselves out of this issue with these lead service lines still in existence. Because right now, what we have in Ohio is every single municipality is doing something different. Some are communities are resource rich, some communities are resource poor, and unfortunately, that then impacts how far, or in many cases, what they ultimately end up doing in terms of addressing this issue. And so what we're mapping out with House Bill 307, with the Lead Service Line Replacement Act, is to give everyone a clear guidance on, okay, what does it mean and what does it take to actually begin to address lead service lines once and for all in every single community? And then how do we begin to allocate funds? We brought back from the federal government and with H2 Ohio funds over $795 million that's still being dispersed to begin to support municipalities to address this issue. And so, to your question, Valencia, about the disconnection between families that may be unwelcoming, well, they may not, they may say, you know what, I know my water's clean, I'm fine. I think the truth is, alongside this particular bill is a public awareness campaign and really giving people filters and educating them about water quality. Right now, a lot of families they don't know what lead poisoning is, to be quite frank with you, until it hits home. And so I think about my own mom. She thought I just had a headache, right? She thought I was having a fever. She didn't think that I was, lead poisoned. And it wasn't until we got into the hospital and they ran the numbers and they saw that we lived in a high lead poisoned area that they decided to do the test, and that I had like high lead particles in my body. And so I think about that oftentimes in reactive policy or reactive moments like that, that then spur people to become more aware. And what I am trying to do with this bill is be more preventative on a front end, and educating families to say, listen, I know that there may be some fear about the government. I understand that, there is a cost related to replacing these lead service lines. You may not have the means to do it. But there is a real cost by not doing anything, because your children may very well be getting poisoned. You may be very well getting poisoned, and those family members around you may be getting poisoned because of our inaction in addressing these issues in your community. And so through that level of community build and community trust, and building that trust, particularly with our advocate organizations, I have seen, I think about Lead Safe Cleveland, for example. They've done an amazing job of advocating in communities so that families understand that this is an issue that they should really seriously, be present and thoughtful about, and really want to see their lead service lines get replaced once and for all.
Thank you, Representative Gerald. Another question we have for you is about how the legislation supports a trained and certified LSLR workforce, and why you
Yeah.
believe that's important for long-term program success.
Yeah, the truth is, we don't, in order to replace, 750,000 lead service lines, we need an agile workforce. And that means that we have to be very innovative about how we um, bring workers to the forefront to help us address what I believe is the infrastructure crisis in Ohio. And so making sure that we have prevailing wage jobs and being intentional about bringing in retired workforce, working with our municipalities on building packages that are attractive to workers to come and say, hey, we may need you to come down to a place like, I'm gonna use an example, Lawrence County. If anyone's been to Lawrence County, it is a beautiful place, but it's all country, right? Like typically you wouldn't want to, there'd be no incentive to go there, right? And remove these lead service lines. But we need workers to move and work in those particular communities. Because we all know that it's not just the urban core that's impacted hard by this. It's the rural communities. I don't know if you all knew this, but I was talking with some engineers a couple of months ago about this issue. We still have wood pipes that still exist in Ohio. Like water still running through wood pipes, y'all, right? And so we still have asbestos pipes that's still in existence in Ohio. And so when I say that the work that we do and we need to do in these communities, we are way behind in some communities, particularly our rural communities. Like I'm going to do everything we can. And House Bill 307 is an attractive bill to bring workers in, to really say we need to be in every county across Ohio to remove these lead service lines, because if we don't do it, it's going to make our kids, our families, our communities sick. And that has a tremendous economic impact and toll on our state. And so that's why.
And last but not least, tell us a little bit about how this bill supports infrastructure investment past the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And are there ongoing state actions to help secure sufficient funding for Ohio?
Yeah, so when you break down how much it will cost, and I don't know what it was like in Michigan, but when we did the math across Ohio, it's going to be around $4 to $5 billion to remove every single lead service line across Ohio. And so in our calculation of looking at the true cost of this per year, over 15 years, um, it becomes a lot more manageable, to be quite frank with you, in our general operating budget that we pass every 2 years in the General Assembly. And so I'm really excited and proud to say that the governor's done a one heck of a job continuously putting money into our H2 Ohio fund. And while this budget did a little bit of reduction, if you will, in those funds, and we're fighting to make sure that we do everything we can to put those funds back, the truth is we are working incredibly hard in this General Assembly in a bipartisan effort to not just rely on the funds that came from the federal government, that we look at our own funds in the state legislature on how we allocate money to this problem. Because I always tell my Republican and Democratic legislators, if you don't pay for it now, you pay for it later. And I'd rather us be really intentional about investment in our communities for safe, clean drinking water versus paying for prisons and various other things because of the cognitive impacts that lead poisoning has on children that then become adults and they are unable to then be working adults in our communities. And so, or it's likelihood that they're dealing with a whole host of other socioeconomic and sociological issues that make them less likely to be productive citizens in Ohio. And so I think about that, and what I'll tell you is, as I've talked to Republicans and Democrats about this issue, this is an important issue for them. Now we can debate about the money. Y'all. I ain't gonna front, right? I know we're on a webinar. I'm gonna be honest, but we're gonna debate about money and how much it actually was the true cost. But I haven't heard a member of my um, uh, General Assembly ever say that this isn't something worthy to invest in, and so that fight still is going to happen. It's still work that we're going to have to do. Still more education we have to do with my legislative colleagues, and really bringing community into the state house to say that this is an issue that we need to prioritize because it is about the safety, health, and the wellness of our communities. And if we can't have clean drinking water, then what do we really have as a state?
Thank you so much, Gerald. I want to thank Sean, Rep. Gerald, and David for being here with us today. We're going to take a couple of questions from attendees. And so I believe this has been, or we have one more poll. I'm sorry, actually, two more poll questions. So let me take those first, and then we'll go over a couple questions from attendees. Have you used or thought about using a pay for performance contracting model for LSLR? Yes, no, or you're unsure. So a tiny fraction said yes, about half said no, and about a little bit more than a third said unsure. All right. And then, Valerie, do we have one more poll question? Yep. Do you think something like Ohio's legislation would be helpful in your state? So again, Michigan passed legislation before the feds even did on LSLR. And that is what
Mhm.
really prompted, communities to really get their programs going. That was circa 2017, or 2018. And so, how do you all think having a state rule set of legislation would be helpful? Yes or no? Ah, more than three quarters of you said yes, and just a few said no. And the few that said no are probably in states that actually have legislation that has passed, and then a few of you said unsure. Well, again, yeah. Oh, go
Valencia, can I
ahead.
say something real
Yeah.
quick? I see the comment from Pete in the chat, and I want to say thank you, Pete, for bringing this up. One of the things that I want to say is the reason why in our bill we were really intentional about full line replacements, and you all know this as engineers. Or many of you know this as engineers. Oftentimes, what happens is when you do a partial line replacement, it's those particles that then seep into the line, and then ultimately it leads to people or poisoning contamination of that water. And what we've seen in order to, and this is just true, I'm not pointing nobody out, not singling anybody out, and maybe you all have a different set of rules than Ohio, but we've seen partial line replacements lead to poisoning and water issues. And one of the things that we've been really intentional about in advocacy is particularly from our residents and communities that came to us to say we cannot do partial line replacements, whether they're asbestos, whether it's lead. We have to do full line replacements because we've seen the damage that's caused. And so, I'm really interested in hearing from you all at some point, more about that. Because what we're trying to do, and I understand that it costs more money to do a full line replacement. And I just think that what we've talked to partners on, engineers about, whether it's a asbestos line or a lead line, removing these lines once and for all, I think is incredibly important because we can't skimp on this, right? This is not something to skimp on. And so I'm just really excited about where our bill is headed. And we had our first hearing already, and it was a very optimistic hearing. In fact, a lot of our Republican colleagues were very supportive of this. And so I'm hopeful that we'll see this one of the first of its kind bills, at least in the Midwest, really take hold and be a model for the rest of the nation.
Thank you, Rep. Gerald. I am an engineer by trade. No partial replacements are not allowable. Typically, the asbestos, though, is usually water main. And
Mhm.
so you get into a tight, well, you got to cut off that piece of water, but you put ductile in and you've isolated and you got to do a lot of other stuff. And so
Okay.
it's slightly different though than the lead thing. The lead thing is definitely about how those particles have adhered to the inside of the pipe.
Yep.
And once you
Yep.
get a little vibration, get a little movement, might shake a little something loose, and it's everywhere, right? It's kind of like turning over the salt shaker. It's everywhere. So we definitely did not do partials. And to be honest, I did some testing to do my water distribution system license and was shocked that the number of people who were operating small systems outstate in Michigan were answering some of these questions on LCR wrong. And this was circa 2017 or 18. Like Michigan had changed the law already. And I was actually just very shocked because it also was indicative of how much the word was not making
Hmm.
it to the nooks and crannies of a place,
Yep.
right?
Come on.
Yep, it wasn't getting out there. So I am going to, there was one last question, and that question was about the material of construction of a service line. And I will default and take the answer on to take the liberty to answer that question. We actually have a white paper that we have worked on that has been published that talks about the different materials of construction for lead service line replacement. And there are some folks who do choose to use a high HDPE material for their service lines, some sort of plastic type of material for service lines. And there are a lot of places that choose copper. It is very subject to your soil conditions and the type of water that you actually are pushing through those lines. And so, different communities told us there were places where they really did have to use HDPE. It made the most sense. They know they might have to replace it, sooner than they will replace copper, but the overall price and needs for them superseded putting in copper that, could get a pinhole in it or could deteriorate because of their soil conditions and some of their water conditions. And so, again, that's something that people are going to have to determine on a case by case basis. And so, Valerie, I believe I'm turning it back over to you to wrap up a little bit.
All right, thanks, Valencia. So I'm going to go over quickly what's next for the Lead Innovation Hub. Um, as I mentioned earlier, we're currently developing the community organizers roadmap, and we're expecting that to go live in the fall. So please, if you're most interested in that, come back in the fall, let us know, and we'll be dropping an announcement for that in our newsletter. We are also trying to add more actionable tools and resources all the time, and that's going to include templates and, most importantly, example contracts and ordinances. So what we've heard most from our utility partners is an issue with how to use language correctly, what kind of language is most effective in contracts. So we're trying to develop and push out to all of you templates for you to use in your own communities. All right.
And Val and team, I see that there are a couple questions. We only have 1 minute left. If the panelists are open to it, perhaps we could reach out to the folks who have attended with some answers. A couple are directed to some folks.
Yeah,
If-
those questions I believe were answered in the chat. Am I wrong about that, Erica? I thought those were answered in the chat.
No, they were not answered in the chat. We were hoping to answer them at the end.
Okay, so just really quickly, David, in terms of methods of contact that works best for your team, what has worked the best for engagement with residents?
Yeah. Presence in the neighborhood has been huge. Once we are able to make contact through phone or mail, we try, and as a matter of fact, what we did was with the internal team, we grouped them physically with our contractors so that everybody was working in the same area. It was successful because of the time it would take to do an entire block. It was almost like an occupying force. You really couldn't ignore the group that was out there working. And subsequently, neighbors would come outside and deal with contractors. Hey, what's going on? If they hadn't already picked up the phone or answered the door through door knocks. So we employed a series of different methods, but between calling, door knocking, mailers, and physically being in the neighborhood doing the work, we were able to consistently get a hold of residents.
And then Rep. Gerald, does the Ohio bill complement the new federal bill that enacts in 2027?
In fact, yes. In fact, I would say that our bill goes a step further, and essentially what it does is it gives more time to our state to replace these lead service lines. And so, yes, but it also is as I like to say, Ohio knows how to do Ohio. And our bill is very much an Ohio bill that gives the max amount of time for cities and municipalities to remove these lead service lines in lieu of what's happening with the EPA at the federal level.
Great. And then I did answer the question about lead service line replacement material because that was the one I didn't think was answered. So again, we thank you all for your participation in the Lead Innovation webinar. We've kept you over by 1 minute. If you have any questions or concerns, do not hesitate to reach out and contact us. And feel free to learn more by contacting Erica at policyinnovation.org. Erica is the lead on coordinating the Lead Innovation Hub, and her email is Erica, ERICA,